I have with me today Dr. John Ahern, sorry. He is a teacher at Wilberforce School in Humanities and Latin, and I had the pleasure of sitting in on one of his wonderful presentations at the Society for Classical Learning conference a few weeks ago, and he spoke on commonplace books. And I want my listeners to really take this episode very seriously. For those of you, especially who've listened to Jake Weideman's episode on penmanship, John Mayer Law's episode on nature journaling, Commonplace book is the same level of importance as the nature journaling and the copy work. And I feel like I have finally met an expert on commonplace books to actually have somebody on my podcast. I sat in on his session and for the first time, I felt like I finally understood commonplacing. I've been teaching about commonplacing for 10 years. I understand what it is, but I didn't really understand how to do it until I sat in on his session. So Dr. Ahern, or John, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here.
I'm so excited to dive into this. I know that a lot of my listeners are going to want to hear all the details and all of the wisdom that you have put into learning how to do commonplacing well. Before we talk about commonplace books, I would like you to share a little bit about how you started your vocation as a teacher and also about Wilberforce School.
Yeah. Well, I was, I guess the immediate backstory here. First of all, I'm fairly young, as those of you who are looking on YouTube can probably tell. I'm in my 30s. I am actually the product of classical education as well as a classical educator. I think that's really cool that we have that moment where there are now some younger people in their 30s or 20s in the classical education world who have gone through it and have managed to not be scarred by it and are actually enthusiastic fans of it, having experienced it. And so that was me. I grew up, my mom homeschooled me. I absolutely loved classical education. I got my PhD at Princeton in medieval music history, so musicology, historical musicology. I focused on the Middle Ages. A lot of my the methods for research that I did just were medieval studies, generally speaking. A lot of comparative literature and art history, similarities there, English, and classics, paleography, codicology, and so forth. So I ended up getting fairly decent at Latin. And near the end of my PhD, I discovered I really enjoyed subbing as a high school teacher at the Wilberforce School nearby. I got to teach the high school students Plato and Homer, and that was an absolute blast. I felt like I was getting myself as enriched or more enriched than they were through the experience. And then they needed a Latin teacher, and now I get to teach. I get to teach Ovid in the original language. That's an absolute blast. Who wouldn't want to do that? So I'm very much enjoying doing that, and very grateful to Wilberforce. I've been teaching for them for maybe about 4 years now. And over the course of my PhD, learning a lot about the Middle Ages, you end up sort of imbibing a certain amount about the pedagogical philosophy behind the Middle Ages. And I feel like I got a kind of window into classical education as it occurred in the medieval and early modern period. And so commonplace notebooks were one of the things that emerged from that.
That's awesome. Tell me a little more about Wilberforce in general. I've heard so many good things about it, but I actually don't know much about the school.
Yeah, it is I should know how long it's been around. I'm going to spitball and say 15 or 20 years. In Plainsboro, New Jersey, very near Princeton University. And it's a classical Christian school. It's got a classical framework, but it has a Charlotte Mason emphasis, particularly in the lower school. The upper school is patterned in a way off of the Trinity School model that came out of South Bend, Indiana. But the whole school is sort of suffused with Charlotte Mason philosophy, particularly the lower school. So there's emphasis on narration. There's a lot of training in the kind of the masterly inactivity, the techniques of masterly inactivity, and cultivation of atmosphere in the classroom and things like that. And so very much Wilberforce is trying to chart that sometimes difficult path of Charlotte Mason and classical education which I know you're more of an expert on this than I am, but sometimes when you get a bit of soundbite Charlotte Mason, it feels like it's not compatible with classical education. But the more I read Charlotte Mason, I'm just floored by
Yes.
how rich and how classical so much of her thinking really is.
Well, it's funny because I didn't even have a clue until just now that your school actually embraces Charlotte Mason, and some of my listeners are like, "Oh no, here we go about Charlotte Mason again." But it's just because she really truly fits into the tradition. And so when people say, "Oh,
Absolutely.
I don't do classical, I do Charlotte Mason," I'm like, if you're actually implementing Charlotte Mason's pedagogy, then you are actually doing classical
Right.
education,
Right.
right? So that really warms my heart to hear that.
Yeah.
Makes me feel glad and I'm also glad that you're reading her because I think that people who actually have an idea about her haven't actually read her.
Yeah.
Because if you actually read her
Right.
and you read Plato and you read Aristotle and you read all the fathers of classical education, you
Yes.
say, oh, well, she actually fits right in there because
Yes.
that's what she's doing, right?
Yes. I mean,
Yeah.
that classic line about teaching children the difference between I will and I want. First of all, that's straight from Plato. It's straight from Augustine. That is absolutely crucial. That distinction between I will and I want. But also, I mean, I think that's in itself a great apology for teaching Latin, because English actually, it's a little bit ambiguous what she means between I will and I want. But if you say cupido versus volo in Latin, suddenly you understand. I mean, if you know Latin, you understand what she's trying to get at, that distinction between the desire and then the more rationalized will choosing the thing,
Sure.
and that is the crucial act of education. I'm a big fan of Charlotte Mason.
Oh, I love that. I didn't even know. I didn't have you on the show to talk about Charlotte Mason, so this just
Sorry.
warms my heart. Well,
Yeah.
no, this is great. It just makes my day, really. Thank you. I want to get into the Commonplace book, and I
Yeah.
know that Charlotte Mason wanted her students to Commonplace and notebooking. She called it notebooking, but I really want you to unpack the formality of what commonplacing really is, the history of it. So, why don't we start off with talking about what a commonplace book is and why it's a good idea to keep a commonplace book?
Yeah. I would start by answering maybe that what a commonplace notebook isn't, or at least what
Yeah.
what a kind of truncated view of the commonplace notebook tends to be, maybe even in classical circles, is that it's a quote book, and you read great authors, or your teacher says something funny if you're a student, or you read an interesting quote on Pinterest and you pop it in your commonplace notebook, and it's a sort of haphazard notebook. What inevitably ends up happening is that you do it for a couple weeks and you have some great zingers in there.
I'm guilty.
Yeah, yep, me too. And then you think to yourself, well, what am I using this for? Because
Exactly.
you input, but then there's no real output from the notebook. You don't go back and reference it, and it's maybe an amusing way of passing a half hour to look back through some of your quotes, but there's not a great deal of sort of pedagogical payoff to that method. And the important thing to note is that that's sort of missing the most important feature of the commonplace notebook from a classical perspective, which is the headings. In fact, the reason we call it commonplace, this is a translation of the Latin loci communes, commonplaces. And this goes back to a very old idea in Aristotle and in Quintilian, that what a rhetorician does when he's speaking, and in some ways even what a philosopher does when he's philosophizing about things in the real world about which he can't have total certainty. What he's doing is that in his mind there are all these spots in his mind, places in his mind where he reaches for arguments that he knows are trustworthy and reliable. And there are certain kind of almost stereotyped, patterned, paradigmatic arguments in his head, and the good speaker is able to draw on those places in his mind, and then sort of spit them out, and it creates an incredible speech. The sort of thing that the people who Thucydides writes about in the Peloponnesian War, Pericles or whoever, the way they're able to just improvise these incredible speeches on the fly is because they have a mind trained with all of these different places where arguments reside and from which they must be drawn forth.
So, question, because I talk about in my book mind palaces, and that's
Yes.
the way that they
Yes.
built memory for rhetoric. Is that what you're talking about, mind palaces?
Yes. Right.
Okay.
In a way, I mean, the mind palace is a technique for remembering long speeches. Right?
Sure.
If you want to memorize word for word, or maybe phrase for phrase, a long speech, the Mind Palace is a great way of doing that. But even more, I mean, it's sort of a broader concept than that. And you're a big fan of Mary Carruthers' The Book of Memory. That's the book where you want to go if you want to read more about this.
Yes,
Is
right.
that the whole mind is felt to be, a kind of a room, a palace in which there are many rooms and there are many spots. And what you're doing when you remember something is you're placing something in a spot. And
In
what
a
you're
room. Yeah,
doing,
yeah, yeah.
go ahead.
No, that's right. And you're furnishing the room.
Yeah, furnishing the room. Exactly.
Yeah. So it's not even just, yeah. And she does say in her books, and I want my listeners to read Mary Carruthers. She's so good. All of her books are great. I have all
Absolutely.
of them. And I quote her a lot in my book. She says that parroting was frowned upon by the ancient speakers, that rote parroting was not,
Yeah.
not that there's anything wrong with rote memorization and reciting beautiful poetry and things, but even Cicero says, and I have this also in a book, that it's like a swirlage in the brain if you're just parroting information that you don't actually understand it as a living idea.
Right. And it's not merely that the rote memorization is bad, but it's more that they think of that as just the first step.
Right.
And that actually memory is this much broader thing of if you don't have random access memory, if you start at the beginning and then you just sort of vomit out that which you memorized until the end, but you don't really know it, right? Until you can go to the middle and pull on that one little piece that's useful to you. Sort of like when many of us memorized a chapter from Romans as kids. If somebody told us, "Can you get me Romans 8:12, verse 12?" we would have to start at verse 1 in order to get to verse 12.
That's true.
And whereas for the ancients, that wouldn't have actually been fully memorized. It wouldn't be fully memorized until we had chunked it, until we could access just the one spot that we wanted. And so that idea that memory is spatial and it's organized according to place in your mind, that's the kind of bedrock foundational metaphor for how your mind works, how memory works. And that's what's going into this concept of the Commonplace notebook.
I want to interrupt briefly to tell you about the first ever narration conference coming up this October. This online conference will feature Jason Barney, Karen Glass, myself, and several other experts from the beautiful teaching team. Narration is the foundation for helping students create well-ordered memories that are fully furnished with beautiful language and ideas. In fact, the opening line of my new book on narration says, "Narration is perhaps the most necessary pedagogy for students in classical schools. Its purpose has always been to cultivate memory so that students can recall and make connections to true and beautiful ideas." This conference is power-packed with amazing topics such as narration for special needs, transitioning from oral to written narration, and narration, the act of becoming more human. In addition, we have scheduled several breakout rooms for practice sessions divided into the traditional grammar, logic, and rhetoric levels, with expert leaders at each one of those phases of learning. Every session is recorded, and you will have access to the recordings through June of next year. The recordings are not sold. They are only available if you register for the conference. So even if you don't think you can attend the conference live, if you are registered to attend, you will have access to the recordings. To learn more and to register for the conference, go to beautifulteaching.coursestorm.com. That's beautifulteaching.coursestorm.com. Now let's return to the show. Thank you. Yeah, so you mentioned the headers being very important. Can you expand on that? Because that was kind of when I heard you speaking at the conference was where I felt the aha moment of, oh, this makes sense, because I've always tried to understand the headers, and it has always bothered me to think, how do I create a table of contents and know how many pages I'm going to need?
Right.
Like before, what if I need more pages, right?
Yeah, right,
and I think that's been my hesitancy of actually doing it the right way. So talk more about that and why it matters.
Yeah. Well, the reason it matters is this also, I think, goes back to the most transformative idea of Mary Carruthers' book, her early monograph, The Book of Memory, which you could just live with that book for years.
I've read it multiple times.
Yes. The most transformative idea in that book to me was her idea that for the ancients and medievals, it wasn't that your mind is like a book, but rather that books are like your mind, and that books are a kind of extension of your mind. And the way that the medievals thought about books and even arranged books and created marginalia in the books and created table of contents and indices in the books was because they were thinking of the book as a kind of extension of how they assumed your mind worked. That idea is totally transformative. And similarly, the Commonplace notebook is, from their perspective, just an extension of how your mind works. If your mind has all these common places in it, and the effective way of using those common places is to organize them under headings. So similarly, if you want a kind of prosthetic memory in the form of a notebook, you're going to organize your notebook in those similar ways. And everything that you do when you read, you're kind of collecting it in your mind. And then if your mind needs an external hard drive, as it were, then you put it in your Commonplace notebook. But that Commonplace notebook needs to be a kind of reflection of, an extension of your mind and how it works. So that's what the headings are for, is to just cut with the grain of how your mind works and how your mind memorizes things. So on the question of the kind of practicality of the headings and so forth, yeah, that is an interesting one. That in trying to figure all this out, my main resource was looking at historic Commonplace notebooks. The wonderful thing about living in the digital era is that actually you can go online and look at many scans of famous people's Commonplace notebooks. So at Society for Classical Learning, the conference where we met, I showed on my slides, there's a Commonplace notebook owned by Isaac Newton that I think it was his grandfather or stepfather, I can't remember, assembled. You can look at, random women from the 19th century who had great Commonplace notebooks. You can, there was another example of a famous person's Commonplace notebook, I can't remember. But you can look at how they did it. And one of the things that I discovered about how they did it was that Commonplace notebooks inevitably end up being kind of labyrinthine. So what they would do is they would say, okay, here are my 10 or 15 or 20 topics. Sometimes the topics would be as simple as virtues and vices. So you'd have prudence, courage, wisdom, piety, avarice, sloth, whatever. You'd put all those in there. A lot of times during the Reformation, the headings would be theological topics. That was hugely common. And in fact, Philip Melanchthon, one of his most famous works, is just simply his theological Commonplace notebook, which was published.
So he would organize his table of contents ahead of time.
Right.
And then as he read things that would fit within one of those headers, he would copy that quote. Is that what you're getting at? Okay.
Exactly. Yes. Thank you for drawing that thread out. Yeah. So exactly, he'd do that. He'd number his pages if this was a physical manuscript. He'd number his pages, and then he'd make a table of contents, and then on the corresponding page, he would put the heading at the top of that page, and he'd start filling in quotations. If you can put in things from your reading, you can put your own thoughts in. You can interleave the two. But the important thing is that the sort of authorities on this issue, you're putting them in there and isolating and organizing according to those headings.
Okay, so let's pause here just for a second, because I have a lot of practical teachers, moms, homeschool moms listening, and I'm sure they're very interested in doing this, even just for themselves. And we'll get into how we do this with students for sure. But I'm thinking like about myself and about like homeschool moms out there, and thinking, okay, if I were a young mom and I had little children and I wanted to keep a Commonplace book because I'm reading parenting books, maybe I would have headers about loving discipline, one about habit training, one about joyful homemaking, that kind of thing. And so you could sort of think in your mind, what are the areas in my life that I want to work on over the next few years as a young mom? Create those headers, and then as you're reading all those different books you're reading, you find quotes that really stand out to you, and you put those within those. So that's what you're getting at. I just want to make this really practical, because it sounds like you can just use it for anything.
You can. So I first started my first Commonplace notebook, I think it was 4 years ago now. And it worked. It took this time. I mean, I had started them before, but I implemented this more kind of straightforwardly medieval system, as it were. And And it worked. It took, I used it for 2 years, and then it was full, and now I'm on to my second, and I use them every day. They go with me everywhere. And I started off with the headings, just choosing things that I was interested in and things that I was interested in writing about, or just thinking very deeply about, writing projects, things that I knew, okay, I'm very interested in, the issue of localism and agrarianism. I want to figure this out. I don't fully understand my own thoughts on it, and I want to figure it out, read lots on it, read different opinions on it. And so that became one of my headings. Political theory became a heading. Aesthetics became a heading. And these were issues of personal interest to me. Of course, over the course of the last 4 years, I've become interested in different things, other things that I was interested in, I stopped being interested in. And the wonderful thing about a notebook, about a living notebook, is that, as certain topics expand, you end up filling them out, and they go past the allotted number of pages that you had for them. All you do is you just update your table of contents. You say, oh, here's a couple of blank pages here. I'm going to update my table of contents. And so you choose 5 random blank pages from later on in the notebook. You steal them from one heading that you don't care as much about, and you assign them to this other heading. And you don't have to do any updating.
So you use a pencil when you create the table of contents. And so then maybe a table of contents area that's, like you're saying, towards the end, you haven't really done anything in it.
Right.
You just change it, make it the same heading as the one that you want to keep going with. Okay.
Or very often in your notebook, you'll just have pages where there are no assigned headings because it's a big notebook, and that's your overflow space. And what I actually love about this notebook, the older one that I'm pretty much done with, it's all full, is it's a bit like the house that Charles Dickens describes in Bleak House. There have been over the centuries so many additions and hallways and strange strange rooms, and it's all very labyrinthine. You go down one hallway and up 3 stairs and to the left and down 2 stairs, and that's very much how my Commonplace notebook feels, partly because of that. But I think that adds to the charm, and maybe adds somewhat to the kind of stickiness of the memorial quality of it.
I'm so happy you brought up Bleak House. That's one of my favorite. I'm a huge Charles Dickens fan. I'd say Charles Dickens, George MacDonald, they're up there with my favorite literature writers. And I'm actually listening to the audiobook Bleak House right now. So.
Oh, no way. Okay.
Yeah, that's great. I've watched the movie so many times that I'm like, I really just need to read the book. So I listened to the audiobook. And I love it. The lady who's reading it's wonderful. But the movie, do you love the movie?
I have not seen that.
Oh, you need to watch it. It's very good. And it goes along with the book really well, actually.
Okay.
It's like it's a mini series, 5 episodes with the lady from X-Files, or Jillian. I don't remember her. I'd never watched X-Files, but she's in it.
Is she Lady Deadlock?
Yeah, she's Lady Deadlock. Okay. It's fantastic. Yeah. So
Okay.
I love that. Just side note, I love Bleak House, so that's great bringing that up. Okay, so let's get into how you apply this as a teacher. How did you transition from doing it yourself now to thinking, hey, I would like to try this with my students? And did it work the first time you tried it? Did you have to tweak it? What did you do?
Yeah, I mean, I should put a caveat on this, that we're still in the early stages of implementing this at Wilberforce. So I started doing this 4 years ago. I wrote a little blog post for the CiRCE Institute, outlining my my sort of trial of doing this personally.
And we'll put that in the show notes then.
Yeah. And it summarizes some of the points that I'm talking about here. But and then the headmaster said, "Well, this is great. We should try this here at Wilberforce." So we've really only been doing it for about 2 years. So with that caveat said, what we do is we follow the like a humane letters curriculum for the upper school. So for 9th through 12th grade. In that, all the students are obviously doing the same kind of course material, the same curriculum. 9th graders are doing it, and it's the same. 9th graders have their own thing, 10th graders have their own thing, but all the students go through the same curriculum. And as such, there are certain questions which emerge as very important. And again, I think a lot of this comes from the South Bend, Indiana Trinity School. But questions like, what does it mean to be human? What is the good life? What does human flourishing look like? What is justice? What is a good death? These kinds of sort of fundamental questions, which we know are going to show up in
The
Dostoevsky in 10th
literature. Yeah,
grade,
yeah.
and they're going to show up in To Kill a Mockingbird, and they're going to show up, whatever it is that we read, they're going to show up in Dante and Aquinas.
So you worked with a bunch of teachers
Yes,
to help so it wasn't just one person. It was
that's
the
right.
whole team working together for a plan. And this Commonplace, that book, does it stay at school and like keep with the students all the way through 12th grade?
Exactly. So the goal is, and we're two years into this, but the goal is that in ninth grade, well, at the end of eighth grade, I come in to the eighth grade class, whoever's teaching it, they let me have a class period. And I come in and I set up this notebook with them. And I say, you're going to have this notebook until 12th grade. And I also always tell the students, I'm going to award personally a special prize to the first Wilberforce student who manages to fill up that entire notebook before they graduate. I'll give you some award, but so far, obviously, nobody has. I mean, these are nice quality Leuchtturm notebooks that are going to last for 4 years, and they all have the same headings. They can add their own personalized headings if they like in extra pages, but they have the same kind of 10 or 15 headings that we know are going to sort of work well in class discussion across that curriculum. And they keep it with them for all 4 years of high school. And no, it doesn't stay at school, at least not in our current iteration. They're responsible to keep it. They keep it with, I mean, I think a lot of them do keep it in their lockers. And, in terms of the practicalities of it, we're still working out the kinks because, of course, you can say to them, put anything that you think is very worthwhile in the Commonplace notebook. 5 or 10 of the very precocious young ladies are going to do that. But for the most of them, you're going to have to sort of twist their arm as ninth graders in order to get them to do that. So oftentimes I will just devote half a period. I'll say, all right, we've read 2 or 3 3 weeks worth of great material. They own their own books, so they get to annotate in the margins. We encourage that. We show them how to do that. And we say, the things that you've annotated in your margins that are particularly interesting to you, put them in your Commonplace notebook. The other thing we do is when we have them write essays, and we do that increasingly in class because of the AI question. When we have them write essays, we tell them, please bring your Commonplace notebook with you. We would love to see, you're writing your 11th grade essay on Homer and you bring something up from 9th grade. You say, oh, remember this line from John Winthrop back in 9th grade? That actually really works well with Homer, and that is exactly what we want to see, and that is what the Commonplace notebook really allows you to do.
Okay, so now we're going to get into the nitty gritty of scheduling, because if a school wants to do this, they have to have enough time in their period. Because I already hear teachers going, we've got history class, literature class, there's no time. How do you make time? Tell me about your period schedules.
Well, so Humane Letters is a combo. It's a double period combo of literature and history.
How long is the class?
Yeah, so they would be 2 55-minute periods separated by, a 5 or 10 minute break. So that's a wonderful thing about Wilberforce that I'm so grateful for, is that there is a kind of Joseph Pieper style leisure built into that aspect of the curriculum. They're stressed in their math class and they're stressed in their science class, but they come to HL, as we call it, and there is a kind of an ability to breathe a little bit. But I will say also, it is increasingly tough. It's especially tough now that we're doing more in-class essays, which takes up, curricular pedagogical time. And then also, if we say, okay, do 10 or 15 minutes of commonplacing, so I am sympathetic to those things, and I don't feel like we quite have the solution yet in terms of actually managing all of those different claims on the time, because what we want to be able to do most of the time, of course, is just seminar-style discussion where they're doing most of the talking. And so, if anyone else has ideas on that, I want to hear.
That sounds like a really good balance, though, to be able to make time for all of those things. You don't want to be doing them all the same every day, all the time, anyhow. I love that you're having them write essays, bringing the Commonplace books in. That's great. I love that you're having them annotate. I annotate my books. And, it's funny, even my Mary Carruthers books are all written in and everything. But I know where the certain quotes are that I want because I've annotated them.
Right.
Like I go back to
Exactly.
them and I'm like, I
Right.
know exactly where it is because I know where I marked
Hmm.
it. I know it's like the middle of the right side of the page,
Exactly.
about halfway in the book,
Yep.
I can
Yep. That's
flip through
because
and
your
find it.
memory is visual, right? It's all spatial. Yeah.
It's true. I know some people have a hard time writing in their books. I'm like, my books are really messy and I
That's
write
how
in
they
them.
should be. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I write
Yeah.
questions. I'm like, why? And then later I'm like, oh, solution, go back to page, whatever.
Yes.
Here's the
Yes.
answer.
Yes. Right.
I
Right.
love that. Um, have you had a struggle with teachers coming on board and how did you overcome that?
Um, I didn't because the headmaster and the dean of academics were enamored of my idea, so they did all the pushing, and
Good.
I just stepped back. So that was a blessing. But also, I have such wonderful colleagues in the humane letters department at Wilberforce who are all just very on board, and they are excited about this. And I mean, I think probably similarly to a lot of us in the classical Christian world, um, we have tried implementing commonplace notebooks before, and it just doesn't seem useful. It seems like something which is detracting rather than adding. And so once I think we added that headings piece, and we did it also collaboratively, where we all said, hey, all of these headings, all these questions that we're choosing, we know they're going to be discussion topics and essay topics, right? They're going to feed
Hmm.
into the prompts that we have, the essay prompts that we have. So it now felt like the Commonplace Notebook had a useful role to play in all of our classrooms, and it was not detracting but adding. So
Okay, great. Do you think you can share some of those headers with us in the show notes? We can
yeah,
put them in the show
yeah,
notes, or can you share your
absolutely.
screen? Do you want to share your screen?
Oh, I'm not sure I can do that, but
Oh,
let's see. I
that's
can. I mean,
okay.
I can read it. They're not that many, so we have.
Yes, yeah, read them.
Yeah, what is a human being? What is liberty? What is justice? So, and a lot of this again has to do with the particular curricular things that we're looking at. What is a human being? What is liberty? What is justice? Courage, friendship, the law, the good life, death. And then we also have two sort of grab bag categories. One that's just simply called eloquence, and that's the heading that is probably what most people were doing with their commonplace notebooks earlier, and that is just zingy quotes, pithy, punchy, edgy
Hmm.
quotes that you put in there, and under that eloquence heading, um, if the teacher says something funny, you can put it there on page 125 under eloquence. And then the last one we have is a kind of miscellaneous, where if there's something in the reading that they think is very interesting, but they're not quite sure where it fits in there. One
Oh,
of the things I also love about this is that oftentimes, we'll be reading, for instance, Robert Bolt, A Man for All Seasons. This is one of the things that all 10th graders read. And, maybe Thomas More says something about, that what's the classic line? He says, are you going to cut a road through the law to get after the devil? That wonderful scene that he has in that section there. Some students will read that. I mean, almost every student reads that, and they're like, "Wow, I got to put that in my commonplace notebook." But one student will put that very quote under the heading "the law," and another will put it under the heading liberty, and another will put it under eloquence. And actually, I love that aspect of it. And they will sort of talk to each other and argue about, well,
defend. Yeah, they can
yeah,
defend their reason. Yeah, that's
exactly.
so good.
Yeah,
So
so
good.
it's a catalyst for discussion upon occasion. So,
I love that. I love that. How many pages do you devote? And like, can you tell us about like what notebook brand you guys
yeah,
decided
sure,
to go
sure.
with, and how
Yeah,
many pages you did?
yes. Yeah, I mean, that is very much something to play with and to hold loosely to. I wouldn't say that there is any, because it depends on obviously paper size, depends on. I'm going to go listen to that podcast you mentioned you did on penmanship, because I think that's that's a crucial piece here
It
that
really
does
is.
interact with it.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so depending upon paper size, line height, all those kinds of things, 5 to 10 pages per. I think it's far better to have fewer pages devoted to the headings and fill those out and leave blank pages at the end, because then again, you can, if you need more than 5 or 10 pages, if you run out of space, you can just update your table of contents and you assign blank pages toward the end. So, for instance, here is my. I'll hold it up to the screen. Here's my sort of moleskin that was the original one. It's very grimy and dirty, and this is about how
Hmm.
big the pages are. And I think 5 to 10 pages at most was all I needed for most of them. Although a few of the headings, like my heading for education, got, to like 15 or 20 pages. So it ended up monopolizing a lot of extra loose pages. Yeah, let's see. Oh, the brand of notebook. So I hate to say it, Moleskine. I can say after having used it for 2 years, avoid. It's a cheaper paper. You start caring more about these things. Like the binding is not good, the glue is not good, the paper quality is not good. But we've found that Leuchtturm, it's maybe $5 more expensive on average than Moleskine. But Leuchtturm is a German company, extremely high quality. And if you can convince the school budget people to spring for that, I think that if you pitch it to them as, hey, we want this notebook to last for 4 years for these students, they're going to be carrying it around, banging around in their backpack. Get something that's going to last, and the binding is the big thing. You want to make sure it's not going to fall apart.
And we'll put a link in the show notes to the one that you guys use. I think that'll help our listeners.
Yeah.
Okay, well, this was amazing. I've learned so much again just from hearing you talk about it again and getting actually to talk to you about it instead of just listening. It was a great presentation. I always end my podcast asking my guest if you have a quote from a book that has had a huge impact on you, which I'm sure you have many, or do you have a book that you wish you had read sooner in your life?
Yes, so many of those. I mean, can I do both actually?
You may. Some people like to do that.
Yes. And I can actually just flip to the quote in my Commonplace notebook to my left. The book that I wish I'd read earlier, and I know that your listeners may already know this, but Josef Pieper, Leisure is the Basis of Culture. Leisure, the Basis of Culture. That's the one for me that I wish I had read earlier. Although I'm glad that I read it when I did. And can I read a quote of his?
Yes, you may.
Okay. Yes. And that's just simply that, let's see. Yes, there are two here, so I have to choose between the two. So he says that the highest forms of knowledge may well be preceded by great effort of thought. And perhaps this must be so, but in any case, the effort is not the cause, it's the condition. It's equally true that the effects so effortlessly produced by love presuppose no doubt a heroic moral struggle of the will, but the decisive thing is that virtue means the realization of the good. It may imply a previous moral effort, but it cannot be equated with the moral effort. And similarly, to know means to reach the reality of existing things. Knowledge is not confined to effort of thought. It is more than intellectual work. So that's one of my favorite quotes that I go back to again and again.
So tell me what it means to you. How has it impacted you?
It means to me that the wonderful thing about knowledge and the pursuit of truth is that even though I will work and work and work and grasp after that knowledge, that's never enough, and that's never the cause of the moment of realization. The moment of realization always comes as a gift. That's one of the things that Pieper notes, is that the truth always comes as a gift, and it's never a cause of all of the thoughtful effort you put in. The thoughtful effort is a condition, but it's not the cause. And and as a teacher, I see that so much, that I just put in to my students, and sometimes they don't get it. And then they do get it, and it comes as a glorious gift, and it's not my doing. It's not my doing. It's not their doing. It's pure grace, and that's frustrating and annoying, but also wonderful. So
that's great. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this wonderful knowledge and wisdom that you've gained, and I'm looking forward to continuing to follow your work and get myself into commonplacing. I'm going to do this. I'm going to make it happen. Yeah. So thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Dr. Fred Putnam was on my podcast a few episodes back, and he shared some great insights about the important works of Josef Pieper. So I invited him to offer a seminar for all of you who are listening. It is a 14-week seminar that starts in September and is actually almost full, so hurry up and register. Josef Pieper created his own Commonplace book of quotes from all of his own books. This book is called Josef Pieper, an Anthology, which he himself compiled from all his own works just a few years before his death. So in this online seminar, Dr. Putnam is going to lead you through reading and discussing the anthology, learning from people and each other to think carefully and well about what it means to be truly human. At the end of this course, you will better understand virtue and the virtues, what it means to know and understand, and the importance of contemplation and celebration in our lives and the lives of our schools, among many other concepts and ideas. To register for these seminars, go to beautifulteaching.coursestorm.com. That's beautifulteaching.coursestorm.com. Even if you don't think you can attend all 14 sessions, if you think you can attend the majority of them, go ahead and register, and the sessions will be recorded for access if you miss any of them. Thanks for listening to the show.